So, like, right at the end of Hawkeye, I started doing the little opening, little music sting thing, and I was trying to think of what I should do to open this video up, and all I could think of after this episode was do like a skit, do like a little skit, but I'm not going to, that feels weird. I'm not going to do that, and now I've spent so long trying to figure out what I want to do that I think that just the absence of one is going to have to make do here. Let's talk about Moon Knight. So yeah, welcome to another episode of R-Rated, where today we're talking about episode 4 of Moon Knight, The Tomb. This was really an interesting episode. There were a lot of like, I wouldn't even call them bombshells exactly, just kind of like, they're like somewhere between a bombshell and a twist, like not as impactful as a bombshell and not as much of a game changer as a twist, but like just large, like cannonballs of stuff just kind of kept happening in this episode. And we'll get there. And I think I see now, having watched the episode, why episode 4 was one that people were kind of talking about a bunch, because the end of this episode is a ride. It reminded me of a couple things, but we'll get there when we get there. So a big part of this episode revolves around Layla's relationship with Mark, and also with Steven as well, though as kind of like, you know, an interconnected sort of thing. We do find out the truth about Layla's father, though it wasn't Mark that did the actual killing, and I don't think he was the one who actually killed any of the archaeologists. His partner was the one who did, and I'm kind of wondering, like, I guess it wouldn't have been Harrow. There's a part of me that's like, oh, was it Arthur Harrow or something? But like, no, she would have, like, Mark would have said something if Harrow was the one who did it. But basically, his partner got greedy and shot and executed all the archaeologists, including Layla's father. And Mark felt really guilty about that. And apparently that is the reason why he met Layla in the first place, which, ick. That's kind of a lot of ick. There's some weird stuff going on there that I don't really like. So that's not so good. There's also a weird... So Steven refuses to let Mark out for the bulk of the episode, and also is, I guess, falling for Layla. And despite Mark's insistence to like stay away from her, essentially, including being like, what, do you want to kiss my wife? Like, it's pretty like understandable, sort of like, hey, don't do that. Steven just still goes for it. He does stop. So him and Layla wind up chatting for a while, and she kind of leans in to kiss him. And right before she does, he tells her why Mark has been pushing her away to try to protect her, that Khonshu wants to make her his next avatar, which is why he keeps trying to like keep her away from all of this stuff. So that kind of admittance there winds up doing a bit for in Steven's favor when Mark later is pissed off, because Steven then does go in for a kiss shortly after, and it's so awkward. It's so awkward. I get that that's probably the point, but like, man, I don't know of any more awkward like kiss moments I've ever seen in a TV show or movie where one or both characters weren't like drunk or something. I've had a kiss that was that bad, but I've never seen one portrayed in fiction, because damn, that is embarrassing. Yeah, so that's kind of a whole thing. And then Mark punches Steven, like makes Steven punch himself off a cliff into the tomb of Amit as they find Amit's tomb. So yeah, no real explanation what the moving of the stars deal was, by the way. I think we're just kind of leaving that in the past at this point. I don't know. That seems like the sort of thing that'd be... We also, for what it's worth, it's not clear when this takes place thus far. The best indicator we have, Layla, in I think the previous episode, gets a fake passport to go back to Egypt, and the date of like the passport being registered or whatever was listed as like sometime in 2019. So we at least know it is after Infinity War. That's about all we've got right now. It could be during the blip. This could be anytime from 2019 to 2024 or even beyond. Technically, we have no real connections to anything to be able to kind of pin that one down. So we're kind of in the weeds as far as that goes. And we have like, 10 years ago this happened and 2 years ago this happened, but we still don't really have like nothing ties that into anything else. So that's kind of it's unclear exactly where we are here. The discovery that gets made early into the episode is that Amit's tomb is actually someone else's tomb. And Amit just happens to also be stored here. And that is, they discover that, oh my God, Amit's last avatar is a pharaoh. Oh man, and they must have been like a really important figure. And like, you're kind of scrolling through like, all right, is it going to be like a recognizable one? Are they going to do like, King Tut or Cleopatra or Ramses or, something like that. And it's a recognizable name, but definitely not the first one you'd think when you go pharaoh. Because as Stephen winds up arriving at a large sarcophagus, he reads the text on it, is like, wait a minute, that's Macedonian. Wait a minute, and realizes that it is Alexander the Great, who was Amit's last avatar, which honestly is a pretty good pull. That makes definite sense given what Amit is and who Alexander the Great was, and like that kind of conquest in such an unbelievably small amount of time at such a young age, and then him dying at 32. Like that's all like a pretty wild story and really ripe to be used for a story like this. I feel like there's a lot of anything in the MCU that has like historical significance is like, hey, if you can think of a figure in history that would have been interesting to do a Doctor Who episode on, you could probably also do a Marvel thing on too. So that's kind of a fun deal there. I mean, it actually makes me curious if actually, as I'm about to say it, I realize no. I was going to say I wonder if Alexander the Great as Amit's avatar ever came into conflict with Wenwu, but I don't think Wenwu was old enough. I don't think he was around that far back, because Alexander the Great was like 4th century BC. So yeah, not really. I think Wenwu was like 1,000 or so years ago, but not like 2,500 years ago, basically. But yeah, so as they're down there, they realize that the passages are arranged in the shape of the Eye of Horus, which would be like a really holy symbol. But it also makes me wonder if Horus is also involved in some way, like if there is actually more of a connection than just the symbology going on. The avatar of Horus brings Khonshu's oh god, what was it called? It's called a I wrote it down and I lost it. Ushabti? Oh god. I definitely wrote it down and now it's just gone. So that's unfortunate. Yeah, Ushabti. Oh, I got it. Hey, all right, cool. He puts that in like this wall of other little stone effigies, but it's way more of them than there would be for other gods. So there's still no clear indication of where the two remaining gods are. And I don't know enough about the Ennead to be able to name them off the top of my head. There's always the possibility too of like, is it possible that two of the Eternals may have crossed paths with the Ennead at some point or another? Like, who knows? But Horus was also pretty firm about like, this matter's concluded and all of that stuff in the last episode, which if Horus was also on the take essentially for this plan to go forward, then it would make some of these things make a little bit more sense, but it doesn't have to be that way. I'm not sure whether I would make the bet right now. I think it's possible. I don't think it's probable. I don't think Horus is going to turn out to actually be on Harrow's side trying to release Amit. But it's not outside the realm of possibility either. Inside the tomb, we get this really creepy priest guy who is... It's interesting because the first, like, the first room we see him in is this like sacrificial altar, like rites chamber, essentially, with all the jars that you put the organs into. And there was a name for it. It wasn't priest. It was something else. Grabs one of the cops that was on Harrow's payroll and just cuts him open and tears out his organs and stuff. And Layla and Steven are separated at this point, and they're like trying to make as little noise as possible. And it's a really actually pretty decent, scary little scene there. And they do a lot of like spooky stuff. Again, it's very evocative of the Mummy and the way that some of these creatures move, where they have almost spider-like tendencies. And like, I think the priest at one point jumps up and grabs onto the wooden, like through the wooden slats of a platform above him and grabs on like this and starts crawling along it like that. Like really creepy shit. But then in the end, so Steven and Layla get separated, and it finds Layla on this little like cliff above a pit, grabs her, pulls her into like a little hole in the cave, and she gets away by tearing off its forearm, and then it tries to murder her with what's left of the bone that was in there, like stab her through the head, essentially, and she road flares him in the eye, and then whoosh, throws him off the side into the pit, and it's like, given how ridiculously quick he was before, I feel like that's a little bit of a stretch. I feel like that was maybe a little bit like better at one-on-one, hand-to-hand, close quarters combat than I think would have been reasonable there. Not dissing on her, saying that like the priest guy should seem like they would be much more formidable. I don't know. Interesting little character though, and I think the writings on the tomb suggested there were 6 of these around, so we may get more of them still. I like the idea of Alexander the Great being Amit's last avatar. I'm curious how many other famous figures or notable figures within the MCU could potentially have been an avatar at some point. Like, obviously none of the main cast of characters that we know are, but, you know, could a previous Sorcerer Supreme have been an avatar? Or, you know, like there's a lot of possibilities for like weaving some stuff together there. Man, for a guy who was so like, oh my God, it's Alexander the Great's tomb, he does not seem to think twice about ripping the bandages off his head, breaking Alexander's jaw off of his skull, and shoving his whole arm up to the elbow into the chest cavity of the rib cage, because that's all that's left of him, of Alexander the Great, to retrieve the Ushabti of Amit. And it's like, this is, it's such, they're like, there's a part of me that's like, obviously it's life or death, and literally life or death for millions or billions of others, so you got to do what you got to do. But there's also like there must have been some other way other than just absolutely destroying just potentially one of the most important archaeological finds, you know, in the human fossil record, essentially, of history. Like, oof. So much oof on that. But what gets interesting is at the very end we have, so Layla manages to escape after finding out all the information about her father and Mark's involvement with all of that. And then Mark is in control, and he's got an axe, and he's ready to fight, but Harrow's got all these gunmen out, and he does manage to kill like 2 or 3 of the guys, and then Harrow just shoots him dead in the chest. And while he's standing there, he gets another shot in, 2 to the chest, and he goes down into water and starts sinking into the deep. And it's unclear. It's another one of those things where it's like, how real or metaphorical is this? And the only reason that even enters into my brain is because then Mark wakes up in a mental health facility of some sort, a hospital for, you know, clinical diagnoses and all of that, an asylum, if you will. And everything is very white, and we're seeing lots of familiar characters. Well, first what you see is a very obvious, like, TV movie quality scene of an Indiana Jones style character wandering the jungle with his like young ward who's helping him out, and they're looking for Aztec gods and all of this stuff and treasure and yada yada. And The movie is called Tomb Buster, which is funny because as they were going to the tomb, my first thought with Mark and Layla just in general was like, oh, they're very much the like Indy and Lara Croft style like duo in terms of, you know, how they handle this stuff. But the character introduces himself in the little TV thing as Dr. Stephen Grant. And it gets really weird because there's a lot of not like what's real, what's not real, because it's pretty apparent that this asylum essentially it's either in a shared ethereal space of some form or it's just straight up in Mark's head. But we see a bunch of familiar characters. Donna is in there in like hospital gown style wear, and maybe it wasn't hospital gowns. It was like a lot of like really bright white and light grays and stuff. And Layla's in there as well, and she's eating. I don't know if that's supposed to be Turkish delight or I'm not familiar with it. It's some very chewy. It looks like a very I was going to say gelatinous, not gelatinous, in the same way that marshmallow has gelatin, like a marshmallowy kind of chewy baked good. I don't know what it is, though, off the top of my head. It looked very tasty, though, where someone is doing bingo. And I don't know what the bingo calling is taking up a lot of the audio in this first chunk of the scene. So, like, I feel like there must be a reason for that, though I'm not really sure what it is. But you see Beck from the previous episode, one of, I keep wanting to say Mogart's, his like main henchman guy. You see the two officers working under Harrow. You eventually see Harrow himself as essentially the head administrator, like psychiatrist guy who's in charge of the place. And it's meant to they're essentially pulling a sucker punch with this. Like the idea is that they're trying to, what I assume is happening is Harrow is in some way trying to he's trying to get the information of where the Ushabti is. And the way that he's doing that is by manipulating Mark's mind into believing that he has never been on these adventures and that Stephen Grant isn't a real person, and all of these people that he's imagined, you know, being around him on his adventures are actually just people from the hospital, and that like none of it's real. So hey, tell me these things about your actual self, and they'd be information on the Ushabti instead. He does eventually he's super sedated at the start of it, which is why I'm assuming that he got grabbed from the water, was revived, but was like, you know, suffering from a lack of oxygen enough that his mind is super spacey, and some level of influence, maybe through Amit's power or something. I'm not really sure. But he eventually gets away. He breaks out of the office. He gets away from the two cops who are essentially, I don't actually know what you'd call those people. The people in the white coats, essentially. They're like guards almost, I guess. They're kind of like guard. They're just like the folks who are there to make sure that people don't hurt themselves or others. And breaks away, and he finds a sarcophagus in one of the rooms. Like as he's running away down this hospital hallway, he starts seeing like golden lanterns that are actually from the tomb. So it's like, okay, he's starting to like break free of whatever's going on. He goes into a side room where there's a sarcophagus, and he pushes it open, and Steven jumps out, and they hug, and they're like, wait, how are you here? How am I here? How is this happening? What the hell's going on? Like, I don't know, but we got to get out of here. They pass by another room with another sarcophagus, and they don't open it, which has me very, very curious, because this is the second time now there's been some kind of allusion to a third personality or something. I don't know if that was meant to be Khonshu, because Khonshu told Steven to tell Mark to free him. I don't entirely know. But they're running, they're trying to get away from stuff. It's fun to see the two of them in a scene together, because it does mean some really tricky camera stuff to make that work. And then they open the door, and oh my god, what was its name? On the other side of two big doors is Taweret, the hippo goddess that was brought up very briefly, but very notably in the first episode, who's just like, hi, like just a little quick thing there. I have no idea what to take away from all of that, because like everything else, if that's meant to be an actual embodiment of Tawaret, then I have absolutely no idea what to take from this. If it's not, if it's literally just another thing that, because now it's going to be Steven's memories are also in there, along with, though granted, Donna, Mark would have known Donna because Mark was around enough to ask someone out while he was at the gift shop thing there too. So that would make sense. That would make sense. So I don't know. I think this episode is definitely a step up, though I still, after 4 out of 6 episodes, hold that this probably still would make a better movie than a show. The pacing is still really slow, and it does get kind of repetitive, and stuff gets brought up much earlier than it probably needs to be, and sticks around for a lot longer than it needs to be, and gets brought up more than it needs to be. Like, everything, you could definitely chop this down into a movie, I think. This is one where I think that someone could actually just take the existing episodes and re-edit them in a meaningful way to make, a feature-length, result, I guess, out of it. Not to say this episode is bad. I think it was actually quite good. There's a lot of really interesting twists and turns going on, and it does still feel like it's getting better. So I'm going to give this episode an 8 out of 10. I think that we are definitely getting at some very weird thing. I did see the name of the next episode is The Asylum, so I guess we're sticking around there for at least a little while longer. I'm going to go back to my initial guess that Amit's tomb, or Amit, will get freed at the end of episode 5, and episode 6 is going to be the big confrontation. It's kind of how they've done a lot of these things. WandaVision did it right away, where Agatha wound up being like right in front of her, like, haha, and then the next episode is that fight and the visions and all of that stuff. So I think this is going to be a pretty similar thing. Mark getting shot and falling backwards in slow motion reminded me instantly of Sherlock, because he's like, now he's in his little mind palace or whatever, which is funny given the fact that Benedict Cumberbatch has his movie coming out next week. So that's just like a fun little connection there. I don't know if there's any other major immediate connections. Obviously, oh no, I've forgotten his name. He plays Bilbo in the Hobbit movies, and he plays Watson in Sherlock. He plays I've forgotten his name. Something Ross. Everett Ross. He plays Everett Ross in Black Panther. And I think Civil War also. Yeah. But he isn't involved in any of this stuff. That just kind of popped into my head there. But anyway, that's what I think about this episode. I'm excited to watch number 5. I'll be all caught up at that point. It's supposed to be the big one, so I'm sure we're going to get some crazy big revelation to go into the finale. Yeah, they also can't transform right now. That's a big thing. Without Khonshu, they can't transform into Moon Knight, which is causing some problems. Maybe Moon Knight is in the last sarcophagus, and the idea is that they had to like willingly let Moon Knight out in order to like embody that personality that's left or something. Or maybe Moon Knight is him at peace with himself or something. It still definitely seems like Mark is the real person and Steven is the dissociated identity, but again, could go either way, could go an even wilder direction for all we know. We have to see how things are looking in the remaining 2 episodes. I would love to hear your thoughts below in the comments. Tell me how you feel about this episode. What would you give it as a rating? Feel free to like and subscribe as well. Doing more of these. I'm going to try to do some more movies and shows and things, stuff outside of Marvel. And I'm going to have to start putting a fan on because it's actually a little toasty in here while I'm doing this. So I'm going to sign off. I'll catch you guys later. Have a good one. Bye.